Chicago Bears fans are going to drive themselves crazy if they keep reacting to every Caleb Williams training camp update as though it's going to make or break his entire career.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, I want to go through what we've been hearing about Caleb Williams at training camp and why I think we're putting way too much stock in any good or bad, but mainly, I think, bad updates about Caleb from training camp and how to better approach this. We'll hear from head coach Ben Johnson about how they're approaching training camp with Caleb Williams, and I think he's able to give us the kind of context that I think is otherwise missing from these conversations on social media and helps give us a more clear picture of what's actually happening on the field as opposed to just snippets of updates we hear from people in attendance. Because at the end of the day, almost everything we're hearing as far as Caleb making an interception or making a touchdown, right, is just a very small sample size and limited information. We are not getting the complete and whole picture of how Caleb Williams is doing at Bears training camp. People that are there watching in person, even if they're watching every single play, they are not able to watch all 22 players on every single play. They're not able to know what Caleb Williams' responsibility and direction on that throw was on a specific play. They're not able to know what route the wide receiver was supposed to run, at what depth, and at what timing. And all of it is to say, like, we really don't have much idea of how well Caleb Williams is or isn't coming along in this Chicago Bears offense, because even just watching practice from the stands or the sidelines doesn't give us a very clear picture. Watching it through live once is a snapshot and a bunch of little snapshots, but missing a lot of context, a lot of important information that would give us a more accurate representation of how well Caleb Williams is responding to the coaching. Because I think they're looking for some very specific things from Caleb, and we'll talk about those in a little bit here. And it's things that aren't super easily measured, right? It's not just about, well, how many interceptions versus touchdowns do you throw at training camp practice? Ben Johnson did admit that, they do want to kind of, aim for, high completion percentage. Of course, like, they want the quarterback to perform well, but like, even when Ben tries to give us something here, right, I still think even this gets kind of a little bit, I don't want to say blown out of proportion, but like, I think we end up like missing exactly what he says, because you hear the number and then you latch onto that, as opposed to how the Bears are actually approaching setting some goals for Caleb Williams for training camp and for the upcoming season.
What are some benchmark goals for Caleb throughout not only camp but preseason?
Yeah, we have not put. You have to complete 60% this day, 65% the next. We haven't done that. We certainly have goals that we strive for. I won't even. It's not a secret. I told him I would love for him on the season to complete 70% of his balls. So you would like to think over the course of practice that we're completing 70% or more. That's hard to just magically arise in a game. So it's a lofty goal, but it's one that we're going to strive for. And so because of that, we're going to use that as our benchmark and kind of work from there.
So even there, he's talking about, people hear that and latch on to like, all right, 70% completion percentage, that's what we got to watch for from Caleb Williams, right? And it's like, no, not even that. Like, if you listen closely to what he says there, right, it's like, it's something they're shooting for, something they're aiming for, something you would like to achieve, right? It's not as though if Caleb Williams is below a 70% completion percentage at training camp practices, then that means he is failing or falling behind. It's like, no, like, here's a guidepost. Here's what we're working toward. Here's where we would like him to get to. Not here's where we expect him to be today, right now. Like, of course, they want him to have a high completion percentage. Of course, they don't want him to throw interceptions and they want him to throw touchdowns. Like, there's an obvious level of all of that, but like, in terms of like that becoming like the expectation and that the results of what we see at practice are not the same as like results we'll see on a game day for such a wide variety of reasons here. So it's like you can't and you shouldn't overanalyze training camp practice video or practice reports. There are just so many different moving parts involved in all of that process that we just don't have the context to see. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, the same thing is true at times in the regular season, but at least with that, you can go back through all 22 film, and also like you're going against an opponent that you've game planned for, and you're running plays specifically to beat a specific defense, and all these different things that are like part of the process of executing offense at a high level. But that's not what they're doing right now at training camp, right? The goal of the offense is not necessarily the same as, well, how quickly can we score a touchdown in this practice, right? They're working on more things than just scoring maximum points on any given play and any given situation. And so when we're a week into training camp practices and we're looking at completion percentages and interceptions and touchdowns and trying to assess based on all that, well, how's Caleb doing? And if he's struggling, well, that, if he throws a couple interceptions, well, that must mean things are going poorly. And it's just not universally or even necessarily the case. There are so many different ways that they are approaching practice here. And we'll get into some details on this momentarily of like how the results of the play might not always be the most critical factor at this stage in the practice process, because the Bears are trying so many different things at this time, and working through the process is like where the growth comes from. Like, if Caleb Williams wasn't throwing interceptions and making mistakes, it would be too easy. Like, they wouldn't be growing. They wouldn't be getting better. It would be almost, I don't want to say it would be a problem, but like the whole point is that Ben Johnson's going to push Caleb and try and coach him hard and make him grow. And what comes with that is making mistakes and then learning from them. If Caleb was out there completing 90% of his passes and not throwing any interceptions, then he's not challenging himself hard enough. He's not being challenged hard enough. He's not getting pushed enough. They're not helping him grow enough. So like the fact that there are mistakes is part of the process of improvement, as opposed to some sort of sign of regression or a lack of progress. In this case, at this stage of the training camp process, mistakes are an important part of the process. Now, if those mistakes are still happening in week 3, maybe even week 1, dare I say, that's when it's a concern. But like first week of training camp, and really almost all of training camp, is the time to make these mistakes so that you don't make them when they actually matter. And I think that's the frustrating part for me, seeing everybody react to all the training camp updates. Like, no, you're wasting so much time and energy getting worked up about whatever comes out about this quarterback at these practices before they've barely had pads on. This is not even been close to anything real. And so it's not a big deal, and it's not a problem that there have been struggles and mistakes. Like, this is all a healthy, normal part of this process and not worth getting too worked up over, especially when we start to go a layer deeper into like, okay, well, like, what are they actually working on at practice? Because when you hear Ben Johnson describe it, you can understand, well, no wonder they're making a lot of mistakes. Duh, this all makes a lot of sense. So we'll take a closer look at like offensively, how they're still trying to figure out what they want to do on offense next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back, so fire up the group chats, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. And it's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. I play my fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th, so stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl, and let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Caleb Williams and the Bears offense isn't out there just mastering the core set of Ben Johnson plays, right? Caleb Williams and the offense are not out there like trying to become experts today on what Ben Johnson is asking of them. Like this offense in particular, but also the defense, are still very much in the experimenting and trying stuff out and seeing what works well for them and seeing what doesn't. And that's where the kinds of supposed struggles that I don't even believe as are really struggles, but mistakes or misfirings or whatever you want to be, the perhaps lack of perfection the Chicago Bears offense is having at training camp is not a concern and not a reflection of a group falling behind or Caleb Williams not grasping the offense or whatever ridiculous narrative you want to choose from that's come out of all of this. Like this is still a time of throwing some stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. This is the weeding out process of determining what you're going to run this season and what you're not going to run this season. And when you don't do it well at training camp, hey, maybe that doesn't fit as well with our receivers or our quarterback or our offensive line or whatever player is involved in those plays. Maybe it doesn't fit their skill set that well, but we wanted to try it and see how they might handle it. And we tried it a couple times and it didn't work so well. Great. Now you know, maybe not going to lean on or rely on that one. And then there's going to be other plays that work really well. And you can say, all right, these are going to be more important fundamental pieces of our offense. And even those good plays, those completions that matter a lot, like all we're going to hear from the training camp practice is, oh, Caleb threw 2 picks or whatever, and then a nice touchdown over here. I think that's the takeaway we get. And we miss the, I don't know what the number is, right? The 25 other throws he attempted, some good, some bad, that weren't touchdowns, weren't interceptions, that we don't know. Oh, well, those were actually really key fundamental plays that Ben Johnson wanted this offense to be able to do well, that they were executing well, but we don't know that, and we don't get that information on the outside, right? We just don't have that kind of access. But I thought Ben Johnson at least did a good job of trying to lay out like how they're handling what they're throwing at Caleb and the rest of the offense in terms of like, you don't want to give him everything, but you don't want to give him too little. And so they kind of early in the process said like, here's a lot, and now let's narrow it down and kind of build up more incrementally from there. So I thought Ben Johnson did a good job of describing this, and I think this gives us some really good context as to, oh yeah, that might be why things aren't a well-oiled machine a week into Bears training camp practice.
Ben, you have to know how much or how you can gauge how much a quarterback's cup you can fill. And like how much have you filled Caleb's cup, if you will? I've talked to play callers in the league like KOC, who talks about with Sam last year filling his cup each week at a different level.
Yeah.
For you, where does that go?
It goes back to getting to know each other. In the springtime, we saturated everybody, quarterback, everybody on offense got a lot of information. We're just trying to introduce a lot of elements of the system. When you look back at it, there's probably some things that you wouldn't run against DA's defense that we just wanted to get introduced. Going into camp, it's going to be a lot here early on. These first 2 weeks, we're still going to do a lot. And it's not so much to attack the defense or anything like that. We got to find out who we are. And I'm going beyond just the quarterback here. I don't know if we're going to be a wide zone team up front. I don't know if we're going to be a gap team yet. There's a lot of things that got to play out, and we won't know until we get the pads on. But yeah, it's something you're certainly conscious of is what's the right amount, not only over the course of camp, but more importantly, once we get into the season. And that's something as a staff that we're going to have to hone into.
Ben Johnson gave us a lot of really good context there, but there's one I mean, there's a couple specific things I want to pull up, but if there's one thing like that sticks in your mind from this, it's that when he said, like, we're running plays that we wouldn't run against a Dennis Allen defense if it were a real game. You understand what he's saying there? Where it's like, of course, this play's not going to work well against this defense at practice because it's not designed to be good against this type of defense, but you still want to run it to see how the offense executes it, to see how all the receivers run their routes, how the quarterback goes through his progression, even knowing that it's sort of a play that's kind of set up to fail, or at least not set up to succeed. And so then, of course, like if you run that play, it's not going to, maybe it's a play that's not very good against man coverage. You know, Dennis Allen runs a lot of man coverage or whatever variation it might be. And then, of course, like Caleb Williams doesn't complete a pass on a play that isn't a good play call for the defense they're going up against practice. And then it's like, oh, well, Caleb's struggling with the offense because see that incompletion or that interception or whatever is he threw. And it's like, well, no, the goal of the offense on that play wasn't to say, hey, let's run the best possible play to succeed. It's let's run this play and see if it actually works, but we know it probably won't. Like they're going in that specific example on that play, like knowing, hey, this probably isn't going to work, but we still want to see it anyway. And so like, you know, if you could know that about every play on offense at training camp, we would have a lot more of an understanding of like when Caleb is actually doing something wrong versus when he was intentionally not being put in a position to have an easy play and an easy completion, right? There's such a big difference between throwing an interception or touchdown at practice when you're trying stuff like this for the sake of trying it, as opposed to, hey, it's in a game schemed up against this defense with these matchups that we've been preparing for all week to try and attack specific things. Like that's when you can be concerned. But when you're still trying to figure out, like he even said, what scheme, are we going to be a gap zone scheme or a gap scheme or a zone scheme? Like what kind of running team we're going to be? We're still figuring that out. And the same thing is going to be true in the passing game. Like this is not just like saying, hey, here's Ben Johnson's Lions playbook and Caleb's slow to learn that. It's like, no, they're still building that. Like they're just trying a little bit of everything, seeing what works well and keeping the good stuff and getting rid of the bad stuff. So like this is all part of that process. And it's why, like, of course, Caleb Williams and the offense are not going to look great. In some ways, the high level moments that we do get feel almost a little bit more like a bonus in some sense, where it's like, yes, these are not, right? He's not running these plays now for the 17th time in a row. Like it might be the first or second time he's ever run these plays in a team drill before. Like this is the exact learning process. And that's the thing. It's not just about Caleb Williams. It's about everyone on offense. It's about the receivers running their routes to the right depth and at the right time. So that there might be an interception at a practice where Caleb actually did everything he was supposed to do on time where the ball was supposed to be, but the receiver wasn't there on time where they were supposed to be. And so the defender gets the interception, even though the quarterback, based on perhaps in this hypothetical Ben Johnson's evaluations, is like, no, quarterback was right here and still threw the interception because receiver was wrong. Like there's just so many different examples and variations of like how what we see watching a play from the sideline isn't always an accurate reflection of what the coaching staff sees and how the coaching staff is evaluating a play like that. And so that's why it's such a fool's errand to spend a lot of time really getting worked up on who does well or poorly at training camp, because there are examples every single year on every single team of training camp narratives of really, really good players not playing well at training camp and everyone being worried, and then they turn out to be just fine because they're really good players, or vice versa, players that everyone loves at training camp turns out to not be very good in the actual regular season because it just isn't, we aren't seeing it well enough. We don't get enough information as outside observers to really accurately describe and understand what's going on well from training camp practices. And I want to go this even another layer deeper, not just in terms of the offense figuring out what it's doing, but also how they're approaching this with Caleb Williams specifically from a like a mechanics and a fundamental standpoint, where there's yet another layer of like, we're still learning and trying some stuff out, so it should be slow rolling this early in the process. So we'll hear from Ben Johnson about footwork and going through progressions and where Caleb is very early in that process for how they're approaching it with this new coaching staff next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. We've all been there. You log on early and wait forever to get concert tickets that are going on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Gametime comes in, because Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. I have the Gametime app on my phone, and I use it all the time. I actually just bought tickets for Paul McCartney's U.S. tour. They just added some tour dates coming through Chicago and Minneapolis, around the Midwest a little bit, and I got my tickets on the Gametime app. I tried to get them initially when the tickets went on sale, but I was waiting in that line and couldn't get them. But with Gametime, I got some really hard to get. Paul McCartney tickets are not easy and they are not cheap, but I got a great deal in the Gametime app. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So not only is the Bears offense still figuring out what it's going to be, what plays they're going to run, what works for them and what doesn't work for them, but Caleb Williams is too at an individual level. Like, one of the big things for Ben Johnson as far as being the sort of quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer type is, to rebuild the quarterback, right? Come in and make him the best version of himself. And in a lot of ways, that starts literally at the ground level with, footwork and mechanics. And that's another thing that Ben Johnson and the Bears are working through with Caleb Williams right now. And so they're essentially, this is maybe an oversimplification, but right, they're asking Caleb Williams to play quarterback in a slightly different way than he's ever played before. And so that's not to say like it's totally different. Like, it's not like he's learning a new position kind of different, but like it is still a certain amount of disruption to his comfort level as a quarterback. And this is exactly what he asked for. And like, this is not like an excuse, right? Or it's not like, oh, we should feel bad for Caleb Williams. It's more so like it really does add to the continued like helping explain why things might not be so sharp right now and why it shouldn't be that big of a concern, especially this early in training camp. Because when you hear Ben Johnson kind of describe how they've sort of torn down and are now sort of reset and rebuilding some of the foundation for Caleb Williams, right? Like, you can understand that this would be a lot for a quarterback to be working through. Not only him thinking about himself, okay, what am I physically doing? But then also this new play, this new terminology, and also, new receivers in Colson Loveland and Olamide Zaccheaus, and, trying to just adjust to a lot of new things at the same time. Like, no wonder this is not perfect in 6 days.
Talking about sort of resetting Caleb's foundation and solidifying that. What for you are the specifics of a quarterback's foundation, the things that have to be in place before you progress?
Now you're getting deep. It's one of the big points of emphasis we had in the springtime, and it's going to carry over to camp, was our pre-snap procedure. And so that's calling the plays, that's the motions, that's the shifts, that's the cadence. We're going to continue to carry that. We use that as a weapon, and that's not going to change. That's certainly an advantage for us on offense. Beyond that, though, there were some footwork things that we wanted to clean up, trusting the timing of your feet, being able to anticipate throws. It's a lot of stuff that goes into that position, and rather than throwing the whole gauntlet at him, we're just building it from the ground up. He took some homework with him over the course of the summer, and he's come back. Even though we haven't done anything full speed over the last few days, we've noticed some improvements along the way. So really excited to see where this thing goes over the next few weeks.
It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of approaches by Ben Johnson between the throwing everything at Caleb from like a playbook standpoint and kind of like seeing what works and what's not, versus like from a mechanic standpoint, kind of going one step at a time, right? Like you mentioned, giving him some homework and all that stuff, but like, I think it's sort of like, let's start with this aspect of your footwork. All right, for today's practice, just really focus on the timing of your drops, or whatever whatever the specific thing might be. And maybe for the first couple of days, we're going to focus on this thing. Okay, now once we've really kind of worked on that and seen some improvement there, now let's jump to the next thing, right? And you sort of start to build and layer on, as opposed to saying like, hey, Caleb, you're doing these 12 things wrong, and now we're going to change all of those all at once. Like, they're already, the phrase they used earlier, like filling his cup with it when it comes to playbook, game plan, scheme, like, how we're throwing to these receivers and all the different, machinations of learning the offense. So then let's take a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a more piecemeal approach, or more like step-by-step approach to the mechanics then, and not throw everything at him. And like, you don't want him to like forget all the good things he's doing as a quarterback too. It's not like his mechanics were completely broken and you need to completely rebuild his arm angle and his drop back steps and how he reads the defense, right? It's just about cleaning some of that stuff up so that the foundational structure is there, so that like based on how far in your drop back you are, that lines up with the depth of routes. So if you're doing a 5-step drop out of shotgun, by your 3rd step you're looking to the receiver on your left, and you should be able to tell about then whether he's going to be breaking open or not based on the coverage. And then on your 5th step, you've worked your way towards the middle of the field, where there should be another receiver either breaking towards the middle or going on a vertical route. And then if you hitch and step up, then you can get to your 3rd receiver who's running a deeper pattern, who should now either be open, or then you go to your check down. Then you go to your check down from there, right? Like, being able to build in that timing to the footwork requires that your footwork be consistently timed and hitting those benchmarks at the same time that the receivers also have to be consistently timed and hitting those benchmarks as receivers. And that's a lot of moving parts for the quarterback to be thinking, while also trying to remember what play this is, what terminology, what receiver, what my arm angle should be, reading the defense. Oh, and it's Dennis Allen's defense, so I got to figure out who's going to be where, right? Like, there's 15,000 things going through the quarterback's mind, thinking about what he's doing physically, thinking about what his teammates are doing. And so with so much new for Caleb to learn, he should not be, in any reasonable expectations, good at it yet. So when he makes mistakes, I kind of just laugh, and it's like, yes, of course, he should be good. This is part of the process. He's new, he's learning. Like, this is all really important. And so I think there's so much hand-wringing and concern, and I know like people were freaking out about Dan Orlovsky on ESPN says, it's going to take multiple years for Caleb to really, really get fully comfortable in this. And like, of course, we talked about this for years. Like, whenever the Bears hire a new offensive coordinator, right? Like, even after year 1, like, it takes years and years and years for a quarterback to truly be fluent and a master at somebody's offense. And considering they're still building the plane while it's in the air here, right? They're still building this Bears offense. They don't know exactly what this Bears offense is going to be. So, of course, he's not going to be a master of it because it's not even done yet. Like, you can't be an expert on, I'm trying to think of I'm struggling with a good metaphor similar here, but like if you're trying to evaluate a piece of artwork and the painter's not done painting it yet, maybe it's a little hard to really accurately assess that artwork because it's still being done. And like, so like if Caleb isn't an expert on this piece of art, it's not been done being painted yet, then maybe we shouldn't be judging Caleb's ability to evaluate this or to judge this unfinished painting. I realize the metaphor is kind of falling apart, but you get the idea, right? Like, this, they're still in the construction process. Like, we can't evaluate the building until it's been built. We can't evaluate the guy who's building the building until he has had a chance to actually finish the building. It's an incomplete product that we are looking. Oh no, is he having trouble? Well, I don't know. He's not done yet. They're not, it's just, it's why I'm trying to hopefully like prevent some of this consternation and debate, and people are already debating like, oh no, is Caleb ever going to take a step forward or whatever? It's like, whoa guys, like, let's just slow down and have some patience and not overreact to really any of this. Like, week 1, then we can talk, but like, Caleb's not going to play much in the preseason, and they're preseason games, so we shouldn't evaluate much of that. We shouldn't react too much to that. Training camp practices, we're missing so much context, and they're still figuring stuff out, so we shouldn't react to that. So there's not really much we can really put a lot of stock into until a regular season game, when they're playing an opponent they prepared for, with plays they've prepared with, and hopefully by then you should have weeded out a lot of this, the good and the bad, to just leave the good, right? And like, that's when we can start to really be part of this evaluation process. But like, for now, let's relax. And really the most important part coming out of training camp is just player health and availability. And so far, the Bears have, knock on wood, fingers crossed, whatever you want to do, have avoided, anything new major popping up since training camp has started. If there are any big changes at camp, you can be sure we'll break them down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to go check out our Locked On Bets podcast, where betting expert Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily locks and can't miss futures picks from across sports. So find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming back tomorrow and make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity for you to bear down.